Welcome. With Wrath and Heresy's release, new lore is ripe for the picking. I'll list them and elaborate in the order they appear. Wrath and ULTRAKILL takes almost direct inspiration from Dante's Inferno. In Inferno, Wrath is a vast ocean where the active hatreds, who do not make their negative attitudes subtle, lash out at each other on the surface. At the bottom, the Sullen, typically more passive than their moodiness, lie gurgling at the bottom. During the events of the book, Dante and Virgil meet Phlegyas on his boat, who takes them to the next layer. In ULTRAKILL, the Sullen are mysteriously gone as we fight on the sea floor. On the surface, we do find the bodies of the active hatreds, perhaps the first time we see actual humans, and not some humanoid zombie thing. We do find a ferryman, but we'll get to that soon. The first lore we get in Wrath is about the Sentry. The Sentry tells us that its creation was during the Final War, which I believe is the war that immediately preceded the Era of Peace. This entry helps us detail the timeline further and might be important later. The Sentry also confirms a throwaway piece of lore that someone randomly brought up in the Discord. The low PS1 graphics and polygons you see in-game are canon. The terminal states that most machines render a simplified approximation of their visual surroundings, but Sentries render in full. V1 is part of those low-rendering machines, seeing everything in 144p, but Sentries see the world in 4K HD, which helps with their accuracy. On the surface of the ocean, we meet the idols, which are a lot longer than you think. Idols are demons, but lesser. They, like the others, are formed from a local conglomeration of hell energy, but their shell is too small and too simple to develop any kind of locomotion. They were carved into this divine image by previous ferrymen as a tribute to the angels, thanking them for their mercy. As the ferrymen wore their holy cloth during the entire carving process, the power rubbed off onto the idol, causing it to continue the chain of compassion by protecting others from physical harm. The terminal then says it's fortunate that the council chose Gabriel to watch over hell, as the council would have called the idols blasphemy and order the destruction if they were there themselves. After that, we have a pretty big lore dump from the ferryman in his diary and in his terminal lore after we defeat him. His diary tells us about the Wrath layer before and during the extinction of humanity. It tells us that the ocean used to be a river, specifically the River Styx. When humanity was dying in mass, the ferryman saw the vaguely human-shaped barrage flood the Styx, which turned the river into an ocean. But during this cascade, something worse happened, causing more bodies to tumble into Wrath, resulting in the ferryman falling into the abyss. He was then saved by none other than Gabriel, who says his same lines in 5.3 verbatim.
Be not afraid, sinner. Your devotion to God shows goodness in you, plentiful indeed. The heart is willing, but the body must rest, lest you squander one of the Lord's creations.
And rescues him from the waters. After we fight and kill the ferryman, we unlock his terminal entry, which says that the ferrymen are husks, who have displayed unyielding devotion to God. Heaven has rewarded them with a cloth to wear over their bodies, which emanates divine energy, energy that turns their bones into bright colors and makes the idols do their thing. It also says that only one ferryman can command a boat at a time. So if a second ferryman forms, the two fight to the death. The winner inherits the cloth and the defeated's head. which one can use to reach to their destination. This means that the multiple skulls that open doors in hell, starting as early as the prelude, are the skulls of defeated ferrymen. That's a lot of sailors. Ferrymen are also unique in that they seem to be the first intelligent husk. As the terminal states, they retain knowledge from their past life to develop better ships, moving past the need for oars and using them as weapons instead. With the death of humanity, ferrymen have lost their purpose. They hope that the angels will bring them to heaven since, they did their job to completion. Unfortunately, no one cares except Gabriel, who doesn't have that kind of power. I would talk about the rocket launcher here, but we'll discuss that in a separate section later. In the next level, we meet the Leviathan, considered a demon, but not formed by Hellmass alone. Instead, the motionless bodies of the Sullen were fused by Hellmass into a serpentine shape, creating the Leviathan, who would foresee the end of the world. The souls of the Sullen assembled into a singular heart, which attempted to escape, but Gabriel pinned it back onto its head with spears and kept it trapped in wrath. Ironically, Gabriel watching over hell caused him to directly oppose God's biblical plan of the apocalypse by allowing the end of the world to happen without the Leviathan. Pretty cool note. However, like the corpse of King Minos, this boss is big and fantastic, but it is a throwaway enemy at its death, and its current state of being, like what it was doing before we killed it, doesn't mean much in the grand scheme of the story. We finally reach Heresy, and this is cool. The only mention of Heresy in Inferno is that they contain flaming tombs, where Epicurus, his followers, and other Guelphs and Ghibellines are punished. Inferno can get very political for the Holy Roman Empire. Akita likely took the mention of fire and turned it into a biblical depiction of hell, giving Dusk Guy dramatic flashbacks and making Doomslayer feel right at home. Heresy, as a location, isn't important per se, as there's nothing really special to glean from here. Curiously though, there are some thematic parallels. Heresy seems to be a conglomeration of specific parts from all of the previous layers. Swords Machine and Hideous Mass return. We have the vast skybox and the pillars and platforms of lust. The piano arpeggios from Glory. And Castle Vane at the end. The Sisyphean Insurrectionist returned as an upgrade to Agony and Tundra from Limbo. Even small stuff like this waterfall vaguely reminding me of 2-3, this slingshot from the beginning of Wrath. Even the introduction of wall jumping from the tutorial. I might be... Actually, most of those are probably a big stretch, but still, it is cool to see how a lot of these have been seen before. Heresy might thematically be a return to form by combining almost everything you've seen before into one big send-off before your final, biggest fight yet in both gameplay and lore. And I think that's amazing. Though I might be looking too much into it, I still think it's cool. Finally, we have our rematch with Gabriel.
Machine, I will cut you down, break you apart, splay the gore of your profane form across the stars. I will grind you down until the very sparks cry for mercy. My hands shall relish ending you here and now!
Something to note here is that Gabriel begins the fight enraged, but then reverse enrages soon after. This already hints that something is happening to Gabriel's mental state right here. You beat him again. He immediately lets up, speaking more softly and saying he needs some time to think. He gives you the same send-off, but lighter and more exhausted.
May your woes be many, and your days few.
In the act transition, he's on the moon, which in Paradiso is the first layer of heaven. Contemplating his battle and what he's become, he realizes that the pieces never fit together to begin with. He realizes that God's divine power isn't as almighty as he once thought, and that he and the Council have done some terrible stuff in the name of the Father, who still hasn't returned from the gas station. He decides right here that he is in charge of himself now, and he will no longer be the emotionless lapdog of the Council. To prove he's changed, he heads to heaven and kills the rest of the counselors. The last one saying that Gabriel won't be alive for much longer if he kills him.
I know.
Gabriel kills him anyway. With his fate sealed, his life on a timer, and his conscience changed, he shows the rest of the angels the severed head of the final counselor. Side note, this is the first time we see heaven, resembling polished ancient Greek architecture with auditoriums, marble floors, large staircases, huge colosseums, natural wildlife, statues, etc. Concerning Gabriel himself, the terminal says Gabriel mistook his passion for a good fight for hatred. Due to his status as an archangel and backed by God, he had always won his battles, never struggling. He never quite had any free will due to his proximity to the Council. And only when outside of their jurisdiction does he realize how much the Council restricts him. Gabriel feels guilty for what he's done in God's name, and he had to make things right by heading to hell one last time. This one last time is probably the third and final time we fight Gabriel. I think it's the third because the entry mentions twice that we fought him. Twice. Then notes that he heads to hell after we witnessed what it just said. So, Gabriel 3 is incoming. The update also released lore on the weapons. Unfortunately, there are no lore on alternate weapons, at least not yet, so these are the default weapons. The revolver was developed during the final war. It uses electrical pulses to fire microscopic pieces of metal at insanely quick speeds. This new technology was dubbed electric guns. Because they need metal shavings as ammo, it's technically not infinite ammo, but the ammo itself is so easy to get, and the gun uses so little of the ammo that it might as well be infinite. The terminal mentions a fun fact that the electric gun, with a rough and scratched surface, is a point of pride, as it means the weapon has been proven reliable for some time. This is because you can refuel the ammunition by just filing away at the surface of the frame. Some people have even scraped off metal for no reason other than style. The electric impulses require a battery and need to be recharged, but the design of a revolver bypasses that because the cylinder rotates, allowing batteries to recharge without slowing the gun's rate of fire. The shotgun is an experimental weapon that shoots hyper-concentrated heat projectiles. Its normal mode of operating is the core eject. Those cores expose themselves to vent excess heat to prevent them from melting or exploding. If the cores fail to generate heat themselves, a button near the grip can pump the shotgun to manually heat them. Though a misfire can easily occur if you pump too much heat into a single shot. Heat weapons, as they're called, weren't as popular as electric weapons because of their unpredictability and need for cooling. However, heat weapons didn't need a separate projectile, they just required temperature variations. This makes their ammo literally infinite, as long as the second law of thermodynamics holds up. The nail gun is a combination of an old bullet gun and an industrial nail gun, likely coming from a construction robot. The terminal notes that all robots, even those not designed for war, had to fend for themselves after humanity became extinct. Bullet firearms became obsolete since electric and heat weapons were created, but this nail gun is unique in that its ammo is, again, practically limitless. It isn't stated in-game, but it's stated elsewhere that the nails are taken from the iron in collected blood. This particular model of nail gun isn't the best, since it isn't designed to be shot this fast, so it either needs a hard cap or heat sinks. The rail cannon is actually pretty simple. It's a precursor to current electric weapons like the revolver. The railgun was first designed as a passive generator, creating a small, constant stream of energy to fuel up for forward deployments. After humanity fell, the machine that wielded it repurposed this constant stream into a massive burst. Finally, the rocket launcher. Like the nail gun, the rocket launcher is a repurposed construction tool. It was designed for construction during the war, efficiently digging trenches, destroying obstacles, and resupplying explosive weapons. Somehow, these next few parts are complicated, so stay with me. When humans created the first rocket launcher of this design, the launcher itself had both the self-supplying ammo and the launcher itself, but it quickly fell apart, sometimes literally, because wires could get crossed, and rockets would misfire due to a design flaw in the form of a particular chemical triggering mechanism. So, they split it in twain, the rocket builder and the rocket shooter. The setup worked best with a buddy, like modern-day snipers and past-day machine gunners. Robots didn't have that luxury in their mutual genocide. One machine took this launcher and smashed parts of a jackhammer to make this the rocket builder, also the rocket shooter, making this the exact thing humans once tried to stray from. Except, it also changed the triggering mechanism from some chemical reaction inside the launcher to using the target's blood, nullifying the initial issue. So the rockets you shoot are incomplete. When the rocket penetrates a target with blood, the rocket becomes covered in that blood, completing the detonation trigger and kind of exploding inside the target. Brutal. If it hits anything without blood, like the floor, I would assume it doesn't quite explode, but rather the force of impact blows the rocket apart, knocking things around without really hurting them. That's pretty much all the lore I can think of that came out of this update. Soon I will release a video covering what all this means for the greater lore, along with a new perspective on what's happening here. We will surely meet again, eventually.